Hey everybody, I'm Holly, aka the ScientoloGeek, and welcome to the 34th episode of Going Over the Data Series. Now, in this episode, we're going to go over Data Series number 27. It does have 4 pages, so we're going to actually continue it in the second video and also get a second policy done in that same video. So we're going to finish a policy, and we're also going to finish a second one in one video, so that's the next time this comes around. But if you don't know, I've taken up Mark Headley's birthday game challenge, which means I want to try to get my subscriber count as high as possible before March 13th, which is Hubbard's birthday. So share this, like, comment, hit the notification bell, subscribe, show people that Scientology is so much more than just Xenu and space aliens. It seems that a lot of people who know about Scientology know some surface level stuff. They know Xenu, they know Tom Cruise, they may know David Miscavige, John Travolta, Kirstie Alley, but it doesn't seem like people have a fuller understanding of Scientology doctrine and what it truly contains. I know I sound like a Scientologist right now, but I promise I'm not, as much as this channel may appear so, sorry. Either way, without any further ado, let's get started. This is the HCO policy letter of the 25th of May, 1973, called Supplementary Evaluations. Star rate all evaluators. Now, star rate, as we know, is 100% on your checkout, which we learned from the student hat.
If one knows how to evaluate an existing scene correctly, which means by the purest and most exacting application of the data series,
even though the more exact you get with it, the worse it gets,
and still does not achieve an improvement toward the ideal scene, several things may be the reason.
How much do you want to bet it's not because the data series is wrong? It's because it's going to be blaming other people.
First amongst these is, of course, poor evaluation. Second would be a considerable disagreement in the evaluated scene with the why, especially if it's interpreted as condemnatory. Third would be a failure to obtain actual compliance with the targets in the evaluation. Fourth would be interference points or areas which, although affecting the scene being evaluated, are not looked at in relationship to it.
Okay, so here he says poor evaluation. But this is if one knows how to evaluate an existing scene correctly. So the first reason isn't even going to exist if you know how to do an exact application of the data series.
In any scene being evaluated, there are 2 areas which are not likely to get much attention from the evaluator, as they may not be remarked on in any of the reports or data being used in his evaluation. These 2 types of area are 1, local environment, and 2, relay points and lines between policy and order source and the scene itself. These 2 areas may be looked at as 1, the plane upon which the scene exists, and 2, the upper stages of authority under which the scene reacts. The local environment. The surrounding area to the scene being evaluated in the matter or a person would be the general third dynamic or other dynamic in which he or she lives his day-to-day life and which influences the person and therefore influences his hat or post. The search for the why, which exactly causes Joe or Joanna to fail to hold post or wear a hat, and which when handled will greatly better Joe or Joanna, may well be their reactions to environments at their level and which may be or may not be there with them. Family or distant friends not visible to an evaluator, or the work environment or on-the-job friends of Joe and Joanna may greatly influence Joe and Joanna. This might prove too inviting for the evaluator to blame environment for the state of the existing scene, and a caution would have to be introduced, that any why must lead to a bettered scene and must not just explain it. Eval by relay points. Thus, in such a problem, it should be understood that one has 2 existing scenes. 1, the person, and 2, his environment. That they interrelate does not make them just one scene. Thus, 2 evaluations about Joe or Joanna are possible, each with its program. To go about it otherwise is likely to prove as unsuccessful as the original evaluation of the person. Life and orders are reaching Joe or Joanna through relay points, which are not ordinarily taken into consideration. Thus, those areas should be separately evaluated. Usually, in the case of a person, something would have to be done to those areas on the same plane as the person by the person himself. So the program might include what the person himself could do about them.
Kind of sounds like we're going into PTS and SP, stuff like that.
The local environment of a material object, such as a machine or an office or a vehicle, may also be evaluated as well as the machine or the office or vehicle itself. In short, there are relay points of difficulties that produce situations on the same plane as the person or thing being evaluated, and these make additional evaluations possible and often profitable to the evaluator in terms of bettered ideal scenes. Yet at first glance, or using only the usual reports, it may seem that there's only one situation, such as the person himself. Completely in the interests of justice, it's unfair to put down a target in some greater area situation like remove Joe. It may well be that stats did go down when Joe was appointed to a post. Well, that may be perfectly true. But by only then evaluating Joe and not the greater zone of Joe's personal scenes, one may very well come up with a very wrong and abrupt and unjust target. Who, in other words, when found, may not solve the scene at all, even when one only targets it as specially train or audit without removal. There may be another scene that is having an effect on Joe, which, if not evaluated properly with a proper program of its own, will make nonsense out of any program about Joe himself related only to his post or position. Another scene may be relaying fatality to Joe, which, if unhandled, will unsuit him to any other post of any other kind.
So just something exterior is affecting Joe.
Thus, Joe and Joanna would have each of them 2 or more full evaluations possible. What the person is failing at or not doing on the job may have a plain enough why that can be corrected by programming and moved to an ideal scene, or at least toward it. What is hitting the person at an environmental or familial or social level might be an entirely different situation, requiring its own evaluation with a proper why and program for Joe or Joanna to carry out themselves, or even with some help from others.
Again, it sounds like Scientology is telling you to handle somebody or something.
In a broader case, we have, let's say, an organization or division that's in a situation. One, of course, can evaluate it as itself, finding a proper why and a nice bright idea and a program. And one can also do a second evaluation of the local environment. This might be the society or an adjacent division or even another organization.
Could you imagine doing an evaluation on an entire society? That would take forever, and that's absolutely insane.
And this will require the location of a situation and finding its why, and working out a program to handle that can be done by the org or the division itself, or with help from outside. The local environment outside the scene being evaluated is then a proper subject for another evaluation. It is a serious error to only evaluate the local environment, as all too often the person or org or division will insist that that is the only situation, and also that it is totally beyond any remedy by their own actions. Thus, if the evaluator is going to evaluate the local environment of a subject that's in a situation, he does it after he's evaluated the subject on its own ground totally. Evaluation of echelons. On any command or communication channel, there are always a certain number of points extending from source through relay points down to the final receipt or action point. These may be very numerous. Some may be beyond the authority of any evaluator, but each is capable of having its own situation that will cause an evaluation of the receipt or action point to fail. These can be called echelons, or step-like formations. The receipt or action point that is to comply finally with the program may be the subject of hidden sources of effect in the relay points of any program or order. Thus, as in the case of a dangerous decline of some activity somewhere, an evaluator has several evaluations possible and probably necessary. It would be by experience a severe error to try to evaluate all these different scenes, such as many echelons, each in a different area, in one evaluation and find a why for the lot, as one is attempting to find a single why for several different scenes in different places, which violates the strict purity of evaluation procedure. One may find the exact and correct why for the point of action and do a splendid program, only to find that somehow it didn't come off or didn't last. Yet it was the right why for that scene. Hidden from view is the influence on that scene from one or more upper echelons, which have themselves an individual situation and need their own why in their own program. Only then can the influence on the action point be beneficial in its entirety. There's a system by which this is done. 1. One recognizes that there's a situation in an area which has not responded well to previous evaluation or has not maintained any benefit received very long.
Okay, so we have a troubled area.
One realizes that there are several echelons above the point being evaluated.
Okay, so we know there's a higher up chain of command.
3. One draws these points without omission. This makes a sort of graph or command chart. It includes every command or comm relay point above the level of the point being evaluated. 4. The points, if any, below the point under consideration, as in one above, are then added to the chart below it.
So you got your superiors and you got your juniors.
Number 5. One now undertakes a brief study of each of these points above and below to see if any have a situation of its own that could influence the success or failure of the original point evaluated as in one above. 6. One does a full separate evaluation of each of these echelon points where any situation seems to exist. Each of the evaluations done must have its own local situation, why, and program. Care is taken not to evaluate no situations. Care is also taken to keep this series of evaluations consistent with the main idea of remedying one above. And 7. The evaluations are released as a series and executed as feasible.
All right, we're going to leave off here and we're going to pick up at this "in doing such a series" paragraph in the next video. So, we've learned that there are two areas that need to be taken into consideration. You have the local environment and any relay points between the sources of the order and those carrying them out. So the local environment includes the scene's surrounding area, which could be other divisions, organizations, or society and personal relationships. Relay points usually include superiors and subordinates. And we learned that you need to be able to chart out the command structure of this little segment that's being evaluated. So you have the original point here. So you want to check for any of the people giving orders to that point from above, as well as any points that relay, that original evaluation. Sorry, the original evaluated point gives to those below it. So you're going to study each of these points to see if they have their own situations that could influence the original. You're going to do full separate evaluations on the ones that are found to have situations that could influence the original. And you're going to handle these points. And then finally handle the original. Quite a bit to pick up there, but I'm glad I was able to write this out and get a better idea of how this works. Because I was curious about what would happen if the problem was outside of the organization. If you want access to any of the flag orders, base orders, any of this data series, the policy volumes, the tech volumes, any of the miscellaneous materials that I have in the Google Drive folder, feel free to send me an email at scientologeek@gmail.com with a valid Gmail address, or hit me up with the same thing in the Discord server. You can go to that, link in the description, and then DM me from there. I will talk to all of you later. See ya.